Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. Today I'm joined by Garrett Jestice, who's a go-to-market advisor for B2B startups and also the founder of 10x Solo, which is a private community for ambitious solopreneurs, consultants, and professionals who want to build smarter, not busier businesses. So we'll be touching on both of those concepts today, which I'm very excited about. And why don't I just give you the floor to start out, Garrett, and give us a bit of background on what you've done so far and what you're working on now.
Awesome. Well, Evelyn, first off, thank you for having me here. Excited to be here and chat with you. So my background's mostly in B2B SaaS, in startups. And so I was kind of the first marketing hire, wore a lot of the product marketing hats, all the way up to CMO of early stage teams. And so I've been solo on my own, running my own business for about 3 years now. And it's been a fun adventure. I've learned a lot of stuff the hard way through trial and error, right? And through talking to other people who are kind of in the same boat. And so a couple months ago, like you said, I decided to start just a private Slack community where other solos who are in the same boat can team up, ask questions, answer questions, learn from each other. And so it's been super fun. So outside of that, I'm a dad of 4 kids. So I'm constantly coaching sports, coach a lot of basketball and soccer, and it's fun. It keeps me busy.
I did not know that. My husband's home today and our 8-month-old daughter is here. So if you hear cackling, that's like her latest thing that she loves doing.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love it.
4 kids, that's crazy. How old are they?
So my oldest is 12 all the way down to my youngest just turned 4 this last week. We're in the thick of it, but it's fun.
Chaos, but fun chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I feel like we have a pretty similar background, actually. I'm also founding marketer, have done that multiple times. And, now I'm out on my own. I've been doing that a little bit more recently than you. So I think with this territory comes, and then also having 4 kids, that you kind of need to make sure you stay relaxed as much as you can and de-stress. So I'm wondering if you have anything in particular that you do to stay grounded, any kind of ritual.
Yeah, for me, it's actually in the last year, I've gotten back into lifting weights and working out. And so I do that 3 or 4 days a week. And that's been a game changer for me. So, personally, I've actually in the last 12 months, lost 60 pounds from being a little bit overweight in the office, working, having lots of snacks regularly, to now I can prioritize it, my health. And that's one of the things I love about running your own solo business too, right? So when I started going solo, one of the goals I made is I'm not going to work more than 40 hours a week, and I'm going to prioritize health and family, right, as much as work. It's one of the things that I struggled doing in the past when I was a CMO of an early stage startup, and there's a constant grind. So health and family have been my big priorities alongside of business. And so, yeah, just being able to work out regularly and schedule time to do it when it works for me has been an awesome blessing from starting my own business. And it's helped me a ton with just the mental stuff too, right?
Definitely one of the biggest perks in my mind as well, just being able to balance life a little bit better. Are you one of those dads that brings your kids into the weightlifting area and has them do stuff too?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. A lot of times it ends up being, I'll drop my kids off at school. So in the past, that was something too. I couldn't, I was gone in the morning before they left, or even before they woke up, and home later at night. So I drop my kids off at school every day and then usually come back and work out. But my 4-year-old likes to join in on it with me. So it's been great.
That's super fun. This podcast is brought to you by Evelyn Cools Marketing. If you're an early stage B2B tech founder who wants marketing to actually work, you're in the right place. As a fractional head of marketing and growth advisor, I help early stage B2B startups take marketing from 0 to 1 by building the foundations, testing different channels, and scaling what works. I'm currently offering a free strategy call where I do an audit of what you've tried with marketing so far and share practical advice that I believe will make the biggest impact on your growth engine. Visit evelyncools.com to book your free strategy call today. Now back to the episode. Outside of parent life, I also feel like we have very similar like beliefs around what's important at early stage startups, especially when it comes to go-to-market foundations. And you have a lot of great content about this. You have a Substack. So I have been perusing that a little bit. And a lot of the topics today come from the content that you've already put out. So I'd love to start at the very basics, the foundations that you believe every team should think about when it comes to their GTM motion and why it even matters to start there.
I have just kind of learned this through trial and error, right? In working with so many startups as a founding marketer in the early days and then also as a consultant. And I think what it comes down to is there are really 4 or 5 core foundations that every business needs to be aligned on and have clear, definitions for what they are for their business. So I say 4 or 5 because the 5th one is kind of just ongoing operations or execution, right? And that's usually what people jump into. It's like, hey, we want to launch marketing. Let's jump into this and start running this channel, put these ads out, do whatever, right? And before you do that, though, you have to have those first 4 foundations really locked in. So the first one is all about your audience. Like you have to really understand who is our best fit customer, right? Most of the time, early stage startups start out by selling to anyone who will give them money, right? On purpose. And so what ends up happening though, is by the time you get to $500,000, million in revenue is you have multiple different types of users or customers, and you don't have the resources to effectively go market to all of those different segments. So you have to be able to choose which is our best segment, where do we want to put our bet and place our resources, right? Then you have to have a really tight offer for those. So the second is, having a really tight offer. How you price and package what you do is really key. The third is messaging, right? And so how do you actually describe your value in a way that resonates with that chosen audience, right? The fourth is channels. So which channels should you prioritize in order to find more people just like the best ones that you've already closed? And then fifth is really operations. So what's the tools, team, budget, all of that look like that's needed to effectively go find more customers just like that?
Something that I run into a lot with early stage teams is like figuring out when to actually niche down to maybe like 1, max 2. Honestly, for me, it's usually like, let's pick one core audience to go after, because a lot of companies will be like, well, this is great for, this vertical, and then service providers. And then like we could do like a B2C offering and a B2B offering. And it's like pretty messy. So I'm sure that's something you come across as well, but like, what is your philosophy around like niching down? How far do you do it in those super early stages?
Yeah. So I actually think that there are kind of 3 stages that startups go through. So stage 1 is all about learning, right? And so that's when the founder is doing like founder-led sales. They're reaching out, they're closing deals themselves, right? Those initial deals. And they're just kind of changing stuff on the fly in order to close deals and see what works. They might reach out to one audience one day, a different audience the next day. They're kind of tweaking how they talk about what they do and as they learn what works, right? And how to close customers. Eventually, though, you get to a stage where you're pretty confident. You've kind of seen the repeatability in terms of the similar types of customers coming through, what they want, similar problems, and what they're willing to pay. You see the repeatability. And so phase 2 is then about focusing and quote unquote niching down and picking the audience and offer combo that you really want to put your resources behind. Phase 3 then is later on, and that's about expansion, right? So you don't do that until you have really nailed the customer acquisition for the chosen focus area or chosen niche, right? But later on is when you can expand. So I actually think that sometimes companies try to niche too early. And I think that you have to give yourself enough time to learn. And the only way you learn is by selling and satisfying customers, right? Can you consistently sell the same thing to the same person in the same way and get them the same results? And really, to me, that's what product market fit is. It's all about repeatability. It's the same thing, same person, same way, same results type of thing. And the more you do that, the more confident you become in where your niche should be. And then you place that bet, niche down, and focus on, building a repeatable customer acquisition motion to find more people just like that.
I totally agree. I think something that I've also run into a lot, which I'm curious if you have as well, is coming into companies that have either like hired multiple marketing people before me and they only lasted a couple months because they were not the right fit. Maybe they came from corporate. Maybe they just, didn't completely understand the industry or didn't fit into the team very well, which is important at such an early stage. Or, the company has tried, like the founders have worked with multiple marketing agencies and they feel like they've been burned by marketing because it just doesn't get the results that they're looking for. And so I think a big part when I come in is like re-earning that trust with the founders on like why marketing can be so powerful. So I'm curious if that's something that you've experienced as well.
All the time. Yeah. Like almost all the clients that I work with, I work with early stage companies that are usually $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. They're facing very similar challenges, right? Which is, okay, they've kind of found that repeatability and now they want to start doing more marketing and quote unquote, put fuel on the fire, right? And they don't know where to start. And in many instances, they have done exactly what you said. I worked with a client just this last year who came to me and said, we just spent $100,000 on a marketing agency over the last couple of months, and we have absolutely nothing to show for it. I think these channels just don't work for us. I think it was just a big mistake. And when we dug into it, with them, and I kind of asked them about some of those foundations, right, that they had, they didn't have clarity on who their ICP was or who their audience was. They had multiple offers and it changed kind of on the fly, depending on who they were talking to. Their messaging was kind of all over the place and they didn't have a good reason why they went to this agency they were focused on some SEO and paid ad stuff, right? They didn't have a good reason why they were focused on those channels. And so when we talked about that and kind of dissected it, I helped them understand like, you know what, that's actually the stuff that you need to go in when you hire an agency and give them, right? And that's what's going to help them be successful in running ads or whatever it is for you, right? And some good agencies will spend some time on that, but I think a lot of times it takes a lot of internal alignment, and that's further than a lot of agencies can go. So again, that's kind of the niche that I fit in. I know you kind of play in that space too, and you can help them make those internal decisions, then go find the right partners to execute. And I mean, this company that I worked with, we kind of went through this process, and a couple months later, like they had some of their best months ever as we kind of wrapped up some of those foundations and continued into execution. And it was really just about clarity and alignment on those foundations. They knew exactly who they were going after, what they were saying, which channels they were prioritizing and why. And that, can take you 10 times farther than just guessing, right? Throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, I could not agree more. So if a founder is listening and they're like, okay, well, we've clearly invested in the wrong partners, and I mean, they can always hire one of us, but if they're just looking for a great, whether it's like full-time first marketing hire or a fractional to work with, do you feel like there's specific things they should be looking for, whether it's like personality or past experience or skill set, like anything that you think is like worth mentioning here?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I do think that it depends on the funding and how big and how fast that they want to go, right? I actually work with a mix of bootstrapped founders and venture-backed founders, worked with both. And even though my background's mostly venture, I've found it really interesting and fun working with bootstrap founders. But the pace and the speed and what you're comfortable with, the risk you're taking on is just different for those types of companies, right? And so for most venture-backed companies, what I would say is they probably need some ongoing execution. That could be kind of a junior marketer who is a generalist, can do a little bit of everything. It could be some good freelancers or agency partners, right? And then I'd say, especially if the founder doesn't come from a marketing or sales background, they need someone that can work one-on-one with that founder to continue to lead the charge from a strategy perspective and understand all of those foundations and what good looks like and what, bad looks like, and how to optimize and how to improve. And so that's the role that I fill. I know you fill a really similar role too. And my role has actually evolved a lot since I first got started, right? So I started more as a fractional CMO, working with slightly larger teams and kind of managing those teams. And over time, just kind of continued to move kind of down market to work one-on-one with these founders, and realized they don't need a full fractional CMO at that level. They need a strategic advisor, a kind of co-pilot, if you will. A lot of times I describe what I do as a co-pilot, right? Where they're sitting together with the founder, helping them make the right decisions so they can continue to lead the charge on marketing and sales and continue to make progress before they get to a point where they hire more full-time employees or a full fractional CMO who's going to manage everything for them, right? I think the founders need to stay involved a lot more early on until they get to that point. So I don't know. That was kind of a roundabout way to answer your question. Did I answer some of it?
Oh, you totally did. And you also have me thinking about my own positioning or offering, because currently I'm a fractional head of marketing, and that covers both strategy and execution. So all of those like messaging foundations, as well as the marketing ops, setting up the CRM, all that good stuff. But I do feel like as I do more of this work, I've always been kind of like the right hand to the founder. That's just in my full-time roles, I've always filled that piece. And yeah, I do think that they need to be really involved in the marketing side. They need to understand it enough, at least, to be able to also feel like they have some control over it, because at those early stages, like, they should be knowing exactly what's happening in their company. And yeah, I position myself as that, but then also like growth advisor, which I feel like leans a little bit more to what you do. And I guess now you have me thinking about like my own positioning.
Yeah. So, what's really interesting about that too is I think this is something I've talked to a lot of founders about that they don't intuitively get, but over time it's kind of like an aha, like a light bulb moment for them. And it's really about, they mostly start with sales. They're doing sales, which is typically like a one-to-one activity. It's all about one-on-one conversations and closing people. And I think that's the best way to find product market fit and to learn what works. Marketing is a little bit different. Marketing is a one-to-many activity usually, right? And so when you're in one-on-one conversations, you can tailor your messaging, you can tailor everything else on the fly, right? And it still works. You can still land customers. And marketing's different. Like if you're going to go run some ads, you can't necessarily tailor the messaging in those ads on the fly based on who's seeing them, right? Again, maybe we'll get into that with AI at some point, but today it doesn't really work. And so I think that the thing that kills marketing the most is a lack of decision-making by the founders on some of those core foundations. Whether it's an agency, a full-time marketer, anyone else, they need tight clarity on all of those 4 foundations if you want them to do good marketing, because they're running one-to-many channels, right? It's very different than sales who can do it on the fly. So anyways, yeah, like that, I know you're snickering because you're probably seeing the exact same thing, right? But that's often the conversations that I have with founders.
That like hit me in my soul, the clarity piece, because I feel like oftentimes marketing doesn't deliver the results that founders are looking for because we have absolutely no clarity on any of these things. And obviously it can evolve. Like that's the whole point of a startup. The sales process evolves, like the market we go after can change, the products that we offer can change, but there needs to be some kind of direction that the entire company is following, at least for like a month, so that we can just make sure that we're all headed in that same direction. And if that's not there, it's just so hard for anyone to like do their job well. So yeah. It's just, I don't know, you like hit a nerve there.
Yeah. Well, and it's about different phases of growth. So that's why I kind of talked about like in phase 1, it's all about learning. Like you can go broad there. You can test different audiences, different offers, different channels. But eventually, once you've found repeatability, you shouldn't be testing all of these different options anymore. You should be focusing more on what works. Because the reason why you want to do that is to build momentum, right? Like you picture taking a snowball and letting it roll down a hill, it builds and builds and gets bigger and bigger, builds momentum, right? But if every 5 seconds, you're picking that snowball up, setting it somewhere else and letting it roll down the hill. It's never going to grow, right, to the size. Like momentum's all about continued focus in the same area. And that's when you really see the benefits. So when you're constantly trying this, trying that, trying this in phase 2, then it's not going to work. You're not going to build momentum, right? That's like more of a phase 1 activity. Figure out where that repeatability is, and then let's build some momentum, right?
What a great visual. I feel like, I mean, it's so true. I think that's one of the biggest, like, it's not a marketing problem. It's just like company vision and like making sure we're all on the same page problem. And that's honestly a lot easier to fix, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I totally agree.
Something else that you talk a lot about, and I would love to dive into a little bit, is how to find your best customers and build repeatable growth through case studies. So maybe we can just talk about that a little bit, your philosophy behind it.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like the way that I think about product market fit is selling the same thing to the same type of person in the same way and helping them get the same results, right? And ultimately what that is like when you zoom out, it's like a case study, right? Like if you were to go put together a case study for your best fit customers, what would that look like? And then if you could swap out the logo, would the story stay the same for all of your best fit customers? If you were to take your 5 best fit customers, swap out the logo, is the case study essentially the same? If not, you got to do more work to find repeatability, right? But if so, you know, okay, I have some repeatability here. It might be this is where I need to focus and niche down and continue to find more just like this, right? And so in many ways, you know, I'm not the only one that talks about this. There are a lot of other people out there who I've heard use this analogy, but it's all about building a case study factory, right? Can you build a factory that consistently produces the same type of case study over and over? And I'm not talking about they have to actually be written case studies, right? A lot of times that's what people think when they hear it. It's really just about repeating selling to the same person, helping them get the same results, right? Same way that you're finding them. It's that level of repeatability. It's their story. And if you find that and you can repeat it over and over, you know, that's when you're onto something. That's when you have product market fit and can continue to build momentum like we talked about.
I actually haven't heard that yet. It feels like more of an internal like business development case study versus something that's like externally facing, which obviously once you can get like repeatability in that and just really strong stories around how you help customers. I'm also just a fan of actual case studies. But I do feel like one of the hard things in the beginning, and this is something that I try to coach not just like founders on, but also the people that are in charge of bringing in the customer, sales, and then supporting the customer, is figuring out some way to measure success. And I think in the beginning at startups, that can be one of the last things to like get done properly. Like I feel like I'm always chasing data on like how are we actually helping customers from just a selfish like marketing perspective. But how does that show up for you? Is that something that you've experienced?
I think so. So when I'm going through a process with a founder and helping them kind of understand where they have the strongest product market fit or where their strongest case studies are, right? We look at different points of data. And so, you know, it's not just about, oh, we sell to companies in this industry, right? It's much deeper than that. It's what's the core problem that we're solving for them? Who's the type of person, mindset, psychographics, that type of stuff that fits into that. But then there's some other internal metrics that I think are important to look at too, in order to evaluate your best customers. If you think about it, like your best customers ideally are the ones that close fastest. They really understand what you do. They pay the most money. They get to success quickest, right? And then they love what you do and come back and refer others, right? So can you find metrics for each of those things that can help be a proxy at least for who your best fit customers are? That's what we try to do, right? And so, you know, for success, that's very different by depending on what you're selling. By company, it varies. But what is that initial success metric? How do you know when someone has been successful with your product or with your service, right? You got to determine that and figure out how long it takes and then have some sort of proxy measurement to be able to understand that, right? And so again, it's kind of some people talk about a North Star metric. It might be a North Star metric, but what's your measurement of success? How do you know when people are getting value, true value out of your product or your service? And I think that that's something to clarify early on, right? Because that's one of those key metrics in addition to, the deal size. A lot of times when we talk about best fit, customers, founders' brains automatically go to, well, this one, which is our biggest one, right? This is our biggest deal that we've closed. That's one of our best fit. And it might be, that is definitely part of the equation is the size of deal, but also those other things. How quickly did it close? How quickly did they get to success? How satisfied were they? Did they come back and refer anyone else? Or, those are some other metrics that really help balance out just the size of deal.
I think what I love about this too is that it really helps you figure out also what channels you should be investing in with marketing first, because kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, maybe, okay, we were running paid ads or we were trying these like random things that we didn't really know why we were investing in those channels. And doing this kind of exercise really shows you, and this is something that I do all the time, I just hadn't really like put words to it, but going in and seeing, which customers, how did they get to us, and which ones are closing the fastest, which ones are we retaining the longest, which ones are like having the most success from our product. And oftentimes you will find similarities in how they got to you. So it's just such a good way to like narrow down what channels you should even be starting with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what it comes back to is a lot of times founders ask, well, why do we need to narrow down? Like, why can't we test all of these? Why can't we do all of these things, right? And I think it really comes back to you can if you have unlimited resources, right? If you've already raised $100 million for your seed round and you're okay like burning through a lot of that, then yeah, let's go after all of those channels. But most companies aren't in that boat, especially like the bootstrapped ones, right? Where every dollar is, worth significantly more because they got to hang on to it, right? And I think that's what it comes down to is you can effectively go after all of these different audiences, after all of these channels. So you want to have a pretty good idea about where to place your bets. And the best way to do that I've found at least, is to base it on historical data. Where have you already found success selling with which types of people, and where can you find more of them? Those are going to be the best bets you can make, right, in order to get a good return on any dollar you spend to drive new customer acquisition.
Totally. So if there's founders or startup marketers listening right now and they say, okay, we need to do this better, we got to really start focusing on like who are those core customers that we're helping the most, where would you tell them to focus? Is it like getting on calls with the customers? What, maybe there's already stuff that's living in the CRM. Like what would you do?
Yeah. So the first place that I actually start with all of my clients is we actually do an audit. So I have kind of a survey that they go through that kind of evaluates each of these foundations, right? And shows where they're strongest and where they're weakest. You might actually be pretty strong when it comes to clarity on who your best fit customer is, that audience. And if that's the case, you don't need to spend a lot of time there. You can kind of move on to the next foundation. Most customers, though, that I work with, most clients that I work with, still need some work on customer clarity, like who is their audience. And so what that typically looks like is we go through a process where we pull all of their historical data from the last 12 to 24 months, and we take a close look at the different segments that they have been selling to successfully. We look at those key metrics that we just talked about a minute ago, right? Where are they coming from? What's the deal size? Like how quickly are they closing? How long are we retaining them? All of those things. And we try to find the segments that are repeatable. And then we go talk to some of them. We pick a handful of those actual customers and we go and interview them and make sure that our assumptions are sound, if they have similar types of challenges and problems. And then we make decisions about where we want to focus marketing efforts going forward. The one thing I will say about that too, that so many times founders are worried when you say like focus, right? Because, well, what if someone who's outside of our ICP comes inbound? Does that mean we tell them no? And usually I tell them, no, of course, if someone comes inbound and they can still get value from your product or your service, then close them, right? But it's about focusing where we're going to be proactively putting our resources, right? we're not going to be marketing to all of these different segments or audiences going forward. We're going to be proactively going after like the center of the bullseye, that best fit client, because that's where we're going to get the best return on our marketing dollars based on, what we've already sold. So usually it starts with understanding your audience and who that best fit customer is, who's that best fit case study, right? And getting clarity on that, because that just fuels everything else.
Always goes back to the audience. I could not agree more. Well, I think we covered so many important topics when it comes to go-to-market. And I did want to briefly also talk about your community that you're building, because as someone who recently became a solopreneur, it is exactly the type of space that I'm looking for. I don't think that many exist that are really great. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about like why you started 10X Solo and what's coming.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking. So I think, like I mentioned, I've been doing this for about 3 years, and so much has come through trial and error, and just naturally connecting with other people who are doing similar things and saying, how are you finding new clients? What's working for you, like for this or for that, right? And those are just kind of ad hoc conversations that have happened over the last few years. And, ultimately, I've done some community building stuff in the past and had success with it and really enjoyed it. So I knew I enjoyed that type of work. But ultimately, I got to a point where I said, why don't I just make something like this? I couldn't find anything like it. So right now, it's pretty simple. It's a private community just built in Slack. It's all full-time solos. And so that can be consultants, advisors, kind of micro agency. Everyone's in a similar boat where they're not doing this part-time on the side. They're doing it full-time. They're not brand new, like everyone has existing clients, but there's just similar challenges that everyone's facing around capacity, about finding new clients, about all of this stuff. And so we get together once a week and we have like a weekly workshop. And so that can be led by someone from the community or an outside expert. And then sometimes that rotates just to open Q&A and networking as well. So we kind of have 3 goals of the community. The first is all about connection, like connecting with other people who are in the same boat and learning from them. The second's all about learning, like best practices from experts through these workshops and everything else. And then the third is about referrals. So most of us work with B2B companies, similar stages, right? And so can you find good referral partners? Because that's how so many solopreneurs find, really good clients, is they come recommended through other people who you trust. So that's really what the community is all about today. It's been super fun. There's still small and growing, but we're about 65 people in there at this point and just slowly growing over time.
Well, I will be joining after this episode. You sold me on it.
Awesome. We'd love to have you.
Okay, one last question that I like to ask every guest on the podcast is, what are you currently excited about, both in your personal and in your professional life?
Well, I kind of already answered from a professional standpoint, is this community. That's been something that's been super fun for me to do. And so like I said, I'm only a couple months into it, have a ton of ideas at this point of other stuff that I want to do. So it's just a matter of kind of prioritizing it, but that's been super fun. From a personal standpoint, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, I coach a couple of my kids' soccer and basketball teams. And so we just started basketball season for a couple of my kids. I coach my son in that, and then my son and my daughter both on soccer teams. And so that's always something that gets me excited. I enjoy it. It's a way for me to get to know their friends a little bit better, but also spend some more time with them. And so we have some fun games coming up in the next little bit, kind of at the end of indoor soccer season and start of basketball season for those. So some of the personal stuff I'm excited about.
So fun. Also, what a great way to disconnect completely. Because I feel like even now, if you're walking outside or trying to disconnect from work, you always have your phone in your pocket, which is basically everything you need to run your business. So nice to be completely disconnected, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a different change of pace, sitting in an office working all day to going and hanging out with a bunch of 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, right, playing basketball or soccer. So
yeah, crazy. Well, if people want to connect with you, what's the best place to do that, and also find your community?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Garrett Jestice, just find me, reach out, love to chat. and see how I can help in any way. The community is called 10x Solo. So the website's 10xsolo.com. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you join too.
Amazing. Yeah, great name. Great name. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Garrett. This was such a great conversation. I'm sure that founders and marketers alike are going to get a lot from it. So just really appreciative for your time and excited to join the community.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Evelyn. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Growing Startups. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to give us a rating so more people can find the show. So happy you're here, and see you in the next one.